In 2013, Jim Stoffer's mother succumbed to Alzheimer's disease at the age of 74. Her doctors, intrigued by the unusual progression of her illness, suggested studying her brain, explaining that it had mutated in ways they had not encountered before. Jim believed his mother would have wanted to contribute to science, so he agreed to the request. However, administrative complications prevented the neurologists from accepting her body for research. Determined that his mother's condition could still serve a greater purpose, Jim sought out another way. He ultimately donated her body to the Biological Resource Center in Phoenix, Arizona, a facility that collected bodies for scientific purposes, harvesting organs and tissues before cremating the remains and returning the ashes to families. Jim's one stipulation was that her brain should be used specifically for Alzheimer's research. 10 days later, Jim received a small wooden box containing his mother's ashes. No note accompanied it, and no details were provided about what had been done with her body. Trusting that his wishes had been honored, Jim put the matter behind him. But a year later, a shocking revelation shattered his trust. The FBI raided the Biological Resource Center, uncovering allegations that the facility had been selling bodies for profit. Among the bodies sold was Jim's mother, who had been purchased by the U.S. Army for $5,893. Her body was used in a blast test, strapped to a device, and blown up to simulate the effects of an IED explosion. Jim's ashes were revealed to be only a part of her remains, her hand, while the rest of her body had been destroyed beyond recovery. As the investigation unfolded, the FBI found even more disturbing scenes inside the facility, including a corpse that had been grotesquely altered, with a man's body sewn to a woman's head. Jim, along with 19 other families, took legal action against the center, ultimately winning a $58 million settlement. The Biological Resource Center was shut down permanently. In 1956, the SS Andrea Doria, a magnificent ocean liner, was hailed as Italy's largest, fastest, and safest ship. Yet it wouldn't be these qualities that etched its name into history. On July 25th of that year, the Andrea Doria was making its way towards the east coast of the United States when it entered dense fog. Following standard protocol, the ship's captain slowed the vessel and activated the fog whistle. Meanwhile, another vessel, the Swedish ocean liner SS Stockholm, also entered the fog, unaware of the Andrea Doria's location. Both ships had radar systems, but tragically, both misread the data. Neither crew reached out to the other as the vessels unknowingly drew closer. By the time they visually spotted each other, it was too late to avoid disaster. At 11:10 p.m., the Stockholm's bow smashed into the starboard side of the Andrea Doria, slicing over 40 feet into its hull before pulling free. The collision claimed 46 lives on the Andrea Doria and 5 on the Stockholm. News of the collision spread like wildfire, capturing global attention. In the United States, ABC News assigned correspondent Edward Morgan to report on the disaster. What the public didn't know was that Edward had just received devastating news. His 14-year-old daughter, Linda, had been aboard the Andrea Doria and was missing, feared dead. Despite his anguish, Edward delivered the report with unwavering composure, never hinting at his personal torment. But as the story developed, a remarkable twist emerged. A girl who had been sleeping in one of the Andrea Doria's cabins, struck by the Stockholm, awoke in confusion. Her cries for help reached a man aboard the Stockholm, who followed the sound to the damaged bow of the ship. There, atop the wreckage, he found a bed with a relatively unharmed girl lying on it. That girl was Linda Morgan. It turned out that when the Stockholm collided with the Andrea Doria, the force had lifted Linda's bed and pulled it onto the Stockholm's bow. Miraculously, she was carried from one ship to the other without serious injury. Dubbed the Miracle Girl, Linda survived with only a broken arm. When Edward Morgan learned that his daughter was alive, he was overcome with emotion and later shared her incredible survival story on air, revealing the personal agony he had endured during his initial report. Though Linda recovered physically, she struggled with the emotional scars of the crash, haunted by the deaths of her stepfather and half-sister, who had not survived the impact. On April 27, 1997, a farmer in Indonesia was guiding his livestock through a dense sugarcane field when he stumbled upon something unusual, a mound of dirt that seemed out of place. Intrigued but cautious, he considered digging into it, though he wasn't on his own land. Instead, he reported the strange find to the village leader, urging him to investigate. The village leader, along with a few other men, returned to the field. They prodded the mound with a stick, which sank easily into the soft earth. When they pulled it out, a foul odor filled the air, prompting them to halt and notify the authorities. The police instructed the men to dig further, and what they uncovered sent shockwaves through the village. A woman's face, buried up to her neck, her body hidden beneath the earth. The woman was identified as Dewi, a 21-year-old local who had been missing for 3 days. The last anyone had seen of her was when she left home to run an errand. A 15-year-old rickshaw driver soon came forward, recalling that Dewi had hired him for a ride on the evening of her disappearance. Her destination? The home of a local shaman. When police questioned the shaman, 45-year-old Ahmad Siraji, he initially denied involvement. However, after Dewi's belongings were found in his house, Siraji confessed, not only to Dewi's murder but to killing dozens of other women. He explained that, over the years, he had buried many of his victims in the sugarcane field, always with their heads facing his home, believing it would enhance his mystical powers. Siraji revealed that his killing spree had been fueled by a vivid dream he experienced in 1986, in which his deceased father instructed him that drinking the saliva of 70 women would grant him immortality. Under this twisted belief, Siraji lured women to his home, promising them wealth and beauty through a ritual. The women, unaware of his true intentions, paid him and even dug their own graves, believing it was part of the ritual. Once their graves were prepared, Siraji murdered them and buried their bodies. In total, the remains of 42 women were recovered, though authorities suspected the death toll was even higher. In 2008, Ahmad Siraji was executed by firing squad for his crimes, while his wife, who had unknowingly assisted him, was sentenced to life in prison. Just after midnight on September 3, 1986, Doug Wells and his wife Kristen were returning to their home in western Montana when they noticed something strange. A camper parked right outside their house. Curious and uneasy, Doug approached the camper and found a man inside, asleep. The man introduced himself as Wayne Nance and explained that he had been keeping an eye on the house, claiming he'd noticed suspicious activity in the area. Doug, not suspecting any immediate danger, invited Nance inside to help look for flashlights. But as soon as they were inside the house, Nance turned on Doug, attacking him with a metal pipe. The sudden assault marked the beginning of a horrifying ordeal for Doug and Kristen. Nance managed to overpower Doug and tied both him and his wife up. After stabbing Doug and believing him to be fatally wounded, Nance went upstairs, intending to assault Kristen. What Nance didn't realize was that Doug had miraculously freed himself. Despite his injuries, Doug grabbed a rifle and confronted Nance. In the ensuing struggle, Doug shot Nance in the stomach. Even then, Nance wasn't immediately subdued, so Doug bludgeoned him with the rifle until he was finally dead. It was only after Nance's death that the chilling truth about his identity came to light. Wayne Nance was a notorious serial killer, responsible for several unsolved murders in the region. However, with his death, Nance took the full extent of his crimes to the grave, leaving many of his victims unidentified and the true number of lives he claimed a mystery forever. In 2004, Mitch was in his final semester at a Louisiana college when he met Kayla, a fellow student. From the moment they crossed paths, Mitch was captivated. After some persistence, Kayla agreed to go out with him. Over the next few years, their relationship blossomed. After graduation, they moved in together, got married, and eventually started a family. Mitch adored their 2 children, and his life seemed picture perfect. One afternoon, while relaxing in his living room, Mitch noticed something strange about a red lamp in the corner. Everything else in the room was sharp and clear, but the lamp appeared oddly blurry. Dismissing it as a trick of the light, he tried to ignore it. Yet over the next few days, the lamp grew more peculiar. At times it looked upside down, distorted, or seemed to shift in his peripheral vision. Mitch didn't want to worry Kayla, so he kept his growing unease to himself. But the more he fixated on the lamp, the more it consumed him. He became withdrawn, unresponsive to Kayla, entirely preoccupied with this bizarre object. One night, as Mitch lay on the couch, the lamp seemed to expand, filling the room with its eerie red glow. He heard screams, felt unbearable pain surging through his skull, and then everything went black. When Mitch came to, he found himself lying on a sidewalk outside his old college in Louisiana. A crowd of strangers stood around him, staring in disbelief. A police officer quickly arrived and rushed Mitch to the hospital. There, doctors revealed the truth. Mitch had been in a coma for 10 years after being struck during a college altercation with a football player. Everything Mitch had experienced, the love, the marriage, the family, was nothing but a hallucination during his coma. The life he thought he had lived had never been real, leaving Mitch to mourn a family that had only ever existed in his mind.